recording, and I will just go through. So we've done introductions. I'm going to give you some basic lay of the land about mutual aid agreements, what's out there, and please, we're so small. Just unmute and ask me a question. Jump in, whatever works for you. But so all this whole category, both stranded worker agreements and mutual agreements, they're all IGAs, intergovernment agreements. And some IGAs are really specifically emergency focused, and we're going to talk about a lot of them. But others of them for completely different reasons. They're about, finance or about other things. So IGA is a big, broad category in which mutual aid agreements and stranded worker agreements sit. And mutual aid agreements are really just, if I don't have what I need and you have it, it's a kind of financial arrangement of how I can get it from you and how I compensate you for that and how the whole arrangement works. So it's a way of sharing between usually local governments, sometimes local and state, but there's a few other agreements in the state of Oregon and in Washington state that that include utilities and that go beyond, and that really anybody could sign up to if they want to. So we are going to talk, this is pretty Oregon focused, so you guys are both in Oregon, so that's good. I feel bad when there's Washington colleagues on. But we're going to talk about some specific mutual aid agreements and what they're good for and how to use them. And then we're going to talk about a stranded worker agreement that we have just developed for inspecting buildings and for building related damage assessments. Okay, cool. My point on this slide is only to say that you kind of start at the level you're at. If you're Wilsonville and you need equipment or you need a person and you know that expertise is in Sherwood and you know them, there's an agreement in place that you've already signed on to, and you can just go to them directly using this agreement. And the financial arrangement is kind of already built into that. That is the value of a mutual aid agreement. And it's especially valuable in an emergency because you don't have to develop all this stuff. It's right there. You just need to kind of write an email and get it. So that's the local level. And if you can't get it at your local level, you go to your county, and there's a county to county agreement, which is the omnibus IGA. If the county can't help you, the county will reach out to the region. It could be the RDPO. The county could then reach out to the state. And then if it exceeds the state capacity, the state will reach out to the region, and or it could activate the national EMAC or FEMA. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the next slides about these specific agreements. So this is a pretty new agreement, and I don't know a ton about it, but it's called ORCA, and it's just emergencies. And and one thing I want to say about these mutual aid agreements, you want to pay attention if the scale of the emergency is big enough that you might be expecting FEMA reimbursement. FEMA has some rules about what IGAs have to include in them. And so and a lot of these will say this one meets FEMA IGA standards. So it's just something to check when you're doing that. So in this ORCA one, it's really just to make any kind of resources, employees, services, equipment, supplies available to another one. It's specifically focused on emergencies, but it's not just emergency response. It's also prevention or mitigating, recovery. It is the full gamut of emergency management. And actually, all of your jurisdictions are automatically already in this agreement, the way it's been written. You can opt out if you don't want to be in it. And there's a link there. We'll be posting this, and I'll send this out to folks. There's a link there that shows all the resources. It has like an implementation guide for how you do it, and it has, here's a request form, here's how you figure out the cost. So that's all online. It's on the web. And that is true about the other two Oregon ones, that everything you need is kind of right there on the web. If you forget where these are, you can go onto the Oregon Emergency Management website and put mutual aid, and they have a page that lists all these. Do you want to move the slide ahead, Sandra? So the MORE agreement does all of those things we just mentioned, but that doesn't have to be an emergency to use it. So it's a really broad scope. So Lourdes and Roberta, your organizations could join this if you wanted to, I believe. So it's for any public agency, but it's utility districts. So it's administered by Scott Wilson in Marion County. All the information is on the web, and basically and the list of all the counties and cities and stuff that are part of it are there. So you can either go directly to them, or you can post something on a bulletin board that says, I'm looking for a snowplow, or I need a snowplow between these dates, or whatever. So there's a bunch of utility districts and schools and metro that are all, I mean, this is pretty broad in Oregon, this MORE agreement, and you can use it beyond emergencies. So I think that's pretty cool. I talked to Scott Wilson yesterday, and he was just mentioning how easy it was to use and how broad it was. Will you advance the slide? Okay. This is the county to county agreement. It's called the Omnibus. So this is just for emergency managers, and it's been signed by 20 counties. And Krista Carter, who was on our webinar yesterday, is the administrator of it. By administrator, everything you want, you can just go directly county to county. So it's not like you have to go through the administrator. It's more that they keep the contact lists updated and kind of keep records and stuff. So with this agreement, like many emergency agreements, the first 12 hours of your service, if it's labor or equipment, is usually offered free. So that's kind of a standard. And then if it's something that goes beyond that, you bring in the financial calculations. Hey, by the way, I said this originally to the others. It's a small group. Just if you have a question, if I use an acronym that isn't clear, just please pop in and say something and ask your question. Okay, so when we get to the state level, if we can't meet the need within the state, we have this Pacific Northwest Emergency Management Arrangement. And the really cool thing about this is that it basically brings in Canada. So it's the whole Pacific Rim down to Oregon. And it also includes Idaho. Now this has been established for 25 or more years in the United States and Canada. And ours is Pacific Northwest Emergency Management, but there's one in the Plains area and there's one on the East Coast. There's about 4 of them that are all this arrangement between U.S. states and Canada states that are kind of in the same geographical latitude. So it's a way of being able to cooperate outside the boundaries of the U.S. And they don't seem to have any staff. It seems like there's somebody at this state that would be part of the committee, the advisory committee. I have put in a call to the state to find out if they could tell us who that was, but they have not responded yet. So there is an operations manual that can be linked to, but everything, it's not a website. It gets downloaded. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is the broad United States, all states are in it, EMAC. So the scope is all 50 states, plus, as you can see, Puerto Rico, some other Pacific islands and Caribbean island states that are kind of part of the U.S. And it's really so that we can share resources from all the emergency disciplines. I think, and Alice, or some of you may know more about this than me, and please jump in if you do. I think the EMAC is kind of closely affiliated with FEMA. And if you see there, the EMAC arrangement, talks about liability, workers' comp, what licenses people have to have, how you work out reimbursement. So it has that already kind of built in. and they have talked quite a bit about developing what they call mission-ready packages with cost estimates. So that would be, let's say that we have a big earthquake and that we need a bunch of building damage assessors that are structural engineers that can do the most complex buildings. There might be a state there that has a mission-ready package, which would mean they have like 7 structural engineers and a chief or a boss, or they know that it'll exactly cost this, and they'll need to bring with them X. And so it's like you could ask for that and you would know exactly what it would cost. They're ready to go. The people are identified. That's what it is. Alice, did you want to say something about that? I saw something came in the chat.
Oh, I just said, we refer to those as prescripted mission assignments. We at our office, and yeah, they're pretty complex, and I think we would all benefit from doing them in advance and having some review, because they often need a lot of space. Sometimes they drop materials in your area, right? And so you need to know what kind of support,
Alice,
how many people you're feeding.
Can you be a little more specific? Are you saying that we should have our mission ready packages, what we have to offer, or that if we can anticipate that we're going to need X, that we could develop a kind of request ahead of time? What are you suggesting?
Selfishly, I would say the latter.
Mm-hmm.
Although the federal government would like us to write up what we're able to provide for others, and I think the Water Bureau did that. But I don't, in our priority projects, I don't have one to say what we can give other people, but rather what we need.
You're saying, like for me at the city of Portland, that is trying to write a plan for all the damage assessment buildings.
Yeah.
Knowing how many structural engineers I have and how many really complex buildings I have, I could probably anticipate ahead of time, I'm going to need this many more. And we're going to need this with them. They need to come with it, and they need to have this training, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And so, where are you going to house them, and how are you going to feed them, and who are they going to report to, and where do they drop their materials? Yeah. All of that. Yeah.
And that's kind of, I mean, the way I've understood this, that's what a mission ready package is. And they will come with as much of that stuff as they need. And then what on your end you need to have already figured out and provide for them. And they can anticipate it'll cost this much. Go ahead.
Well, that would be true if agencies like ours went into the EMAC and did what I just told you is not my priority, right? And put in like, hey, this is what we have to offer others. This is how many people it is. This is how much. This is what we would need to support it. But there's very few mission ready packages in the EMAC, because most people are like us and they're like prioritizing the things that we need. And so we're creating prescripted mission requests, right? Mission assignments, like
not what we have available.
Yeah. So often what you find is you go in there to look like what's available, and there isn't anything. So you have to back into it by saying, this is what I need. And then somebody's going to tell you, well, that you can also use the prep tool that is the resource typing tool on the feds, because those are what I would consider kind of a mission package. So the search and rescue team, the type 1 search and rescue team, is what I would consider a mission ready package.
Right. And that is what you can, kind of stuff. I mean, search and rescue is the one area where there are kind of mission ready packages. There's a team from LA that is often called internationally. There's a team from Fairfax County, Virginia, that is often called out to do that. For the rest of you on the thing that have not been emergency manager as long as Alice has, do you have any questions about what she said? Is there anything there that was unclear to you? She's kind of saying you can go into the EMAC website and find out what packages are available. So, okay, I'm looking and seeing that there are no more questions about that. But also, there's another piece here, which is it's state to state. So Alice, as a Multnomah County emergency manager, would be working with somebody from the state. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alice, that would be making this request through EMAC because it's a state to state agreement. It's not a county to
Yeah,
state agreement.
except for they expect you to do all the work, which is appropriate, right? But yeah,
But you
essentially
work with
you
somebody
do
at the state
everything
level
and then submit it to the state.
and they have to do state to state.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. But it does, there's county to county agreements and state to state agreements kind of people are kind of working at their own level. Okay. That is the end of the information I wanted to provide about mutual aid agreements. Are there any questions about this before we move into the swag? You'll get this presentation, all the links to where these are available. So any questions? It's pretty straightforward until you do it. And then until you're like trying to like, do I need this? Do I need that? Okay, let's go on to the next section. So this amazing picture that Sandra found is from the 2018 Alaska earthquake. And I'm trying to set the stage here for when you might need a stranded worker agreement. If that car, and you can see, you can kind of, there's an aerial view looking down on the right-hand side and then more of a lateral view on the left-hand side. If you're that car and your work is behind you and you're headed home, it's going to be a while before you can report to your normal work location. And that's when a stranded worker agreement is critical. Will you advance the slide? So a stranded worker agreement is an example of an IGA, but it's also pretty specific. It's just for people, for somebody who is stranded and can't report at their normal work location. And it's really just for that period of time when they can't report. And it's so that a lot of our trained people who work in one town and live in another town, that they can support wherever they are and help out wherever they are until they can get back to their normal work location. So the anticipation is this might have to do with transportation issues. Roads and bridges are disrupted. Maybe communication, though, even if you couldn't communicate, if you could drive and get to your place, you can try to go there. But it's really very specific and limited, unlike those mutual aid agreements we just discussed, to people and to people that can't get to their normal work locations and to people that have specific valuable skills that could help out another jurisdiction. So, so you can see by just thinking about that there's a piece here where even if we have this agreement and everybody signed it, if nobody knows about it, if your staff who live in another county don't know that they can do this, it's not going to be that helpful. So there is definitely an awareness and an education piece that we need to work on for this, so that all, especially building evaluators, that they are all going to understand that they should report to wherever they can report to if they can't get to their normal work location. Will you advance the slide, please, Sandra? So it's government to government. So Roberta and Lourdes, it probably won't apply to you guys. Because it's for people who are working for the government, and it's for the purpose that I just mentioned, to allow people to use their skills to support another jurisdiction while they're limited in their transportation. Will you advance the slide? Okay, now we're just going to start with some definitions about this. I did mention before, and for those of you in Washington County, their RDPO already has a stranded worker agreement for emergency operations staff. Okay. I'm looking at your comment, Alice. RDPO already has this for emergency operations, and this one is specific for building related staff. So RDPO probably needs to update that other one because they require actual names of people that, you know, work in Washington County, but live in the city of Portland that could then report to Portland. So, but that already exists for emergency operations and probably just needs to be maintained and updated. This is specifically for buildings, for doing building damage assessments and everything building related. And so I just want to look at a couple definitions here. Building safety evaluator is a terminology we're using in the Oregon ORSAP to talk about the people who are qualified and credentialed to inspect buildings. It's the jurisdiction's responsibility to do the rapid damage assessment of buildings. Not a detailed one, but the rapid one that is that ATC 20 discusses in the rapid ATC 20 form. So the people that ATC 20 thinks are qualified to do that are building inspectors, plans examiners, architects, engineers that are employed by the local government. So they have a credential like a engineer license or a building inspector, and then they are trained in the ATC program. And Paul and Chris are online. Chris just did a training like this for Hillsborough. We have ATC 20 trainings coming up in April, May, and June. Both, I think, one in Vancouver and some that Clackamas County are hosting that will be online. So we do have a bunch of trainings for this coming up. That means that if you have people in your jurisdiction or in Northwest Natural that are architects, engineers, building inspectors are only working for the city, but if you have people with those kind of credentials, then they could be trained in the ATC 20 and support the rapid damage assessment. So there's a piece here about who's authorized to do it, and it's the city, it's a municipality or the county's job to decide who they would authorize to do these. And then there's what kind of qualifications do you need to have to do it, and have you had the ATC 20 training? So you can see there's kind of three things going on there. And all of that, the ATC 20 training, which is used internationally for doing building damage assessments, so it's accepted and used all over, is usually wrapped in to a state emergency program. So CalOES, California Office of Emergency Services, SAP, Safety Assessment Program. CalOES SAP is the oldest and most established one of those systems. So the training that Chris just did in Hillsborough, he did under the CalOES system, right, Chris? I think that's what we discussed.
Yes, yeah. Our the training we put together we were utilizing the CalOES SAP training, but we tried to supplement information into that training that ties into the newer Oregon program that just went into place last year.
Right. So Washington also has a program called WASAFE. In the California system, this program is the CalOES system is supported by the California Office of Emergency Management. In Washington, the Washington inspection kind of regime that uses ATC 20 is under the building officials. It's WABO. In Oregon, ORSAP, which as Chris said is just being developed, it is under the state fire marshal's office. So, but each of and we're right now developing a training module so that you could be trained in the ORSAP system. But what we're working for is reciprocity between these systems so that we could take anybody who was credentialed in CalOES SAP would be accepted to do these inspections in Oregon and WASAFE. I don't think this is all completely worked out yet, but of course that is the intention. The intention is that there'll be reciprocity, and if you're credentialed in one, you'd be accepted to do your work in the other. Did you guys want to say something, Hillsborough? I just noticed your screen came on.
Well, so the training that we're doing actually gets them certified CalSAP, and ORSAP has created an element in the online deal that once you identify your CalSAP certified, they are actually now making the ORSAP certification cards. So,
Right.
And we've got more of those training happening on May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th through the Oregon Building Officials Association training. So if anybody's interested in sending their building division people through that to get certified, both CalSAP and ORSAP, it is now set up in a way that they can get certified both.
Okay, thank you. So ORSAP, since Chris and some others and I have been working with them to do this, is set up to receive and to have reciprocity with the other two. The thing I'm not totally sure about is that the other two are not necessarily set up yet to have reciprocity with ORSAP. So just discussing this training, because many of you have people that want this training. If you are on the mailing list to get this webinar information, we will be sending out when trainings are available. We're hoping that Vancouver will do a WASAFE one. And we will be doing the Cal OES one, but also add the ORSAP module that Chris and my colleague Dave Terry's are developing. So Chris is just telling us that the building officials is offering one. I think you probably have to pay for that. The ones we're offering in Clackamas and others will be free because they're paid for by my project. But there are plenty coming up, and Chris, let me get those dates from you so that we can we'll add those to our newsletter. So there should be plenty of opportunities in Q2 for folks to get trained on this. Did you want to say something else?
No, yeah, it's going to be May 2nd to the 4th. I believe it'll be 3 days we're putting it on. So it's 3 separate trainings. They're not one training. So every day we put it on, it'll be a new group of people that will be getting certified. And I do want to just say the Cal OES SAP training, I think they tried to base a lot of that on the ATC 20 evaluation center, but it wasn't quite a full ATC 20 training. So a lot of the material we added to the training that we'll be offering with the what I call the ORSAP added material is more of the ATC 20 building assessment, building evaluation.
Right.
So.
Yep, that's great. And but anyway, there will be plenty of training opportunities that are important, and that hopefully the one Chris is offering through OBOA is or is it BOMA? Anyway, the one he's offering, that's face-to-face, which is often a better training experience. The Clackamas ones are going to be online, and I think the Vancouver one is going to be face-to-face. So just so you know that that's coming up, and you can email me afterwards if you want to make sure and get that information if you're not on our list. So anyway, those folks, the folks that are trained in that and that have the qualifications from as an engineer and architect and work for the government are what we call BSEs, Building Safety Evaluators. Those are the people qualified to be deployed by the jurisdiction and go do those rapid damage assessments where you put a placard on a building that says red, unsafe, don't enter, yellow, restricted access, green, looks fine to us. So those people are included in the SWAG. Other building related staff are included, and this is a little vaguer, but what we were thinking is administrative permitting staff, permitting software support if needed, facility maintenance technicians that could be put on a team of BSEs, all those kind of folks. So both of those two other building related staff and BSEs are what we're calling for the rest of this presentation, stranded workers, as we go on. Let's move through the other slide. So the other two definitions are the responding agency. That's like, let's say that I show up at your place, my agency that hires me, that's the responding agency. They provide the stranded worker. Not that they want to, but they do because because I don't live in the town. So, and a receiving agency is the one that accepts the work. That's where I'm reporting to work and trying to help out. Okay. It's just important to understand that terminology. All right, let's go to the next one. So the next few slides that I'm telling you are kind of what our expectations are for each of these group of people. So for the stranded worker, I'm just going to use myself as an example. Unfortunately, I'm not qualified as a BSE, but let's just say I was. I need to make every effort to report a normal work to my normal work location before I offer to help a receiving agency. I need to determine if it's actually safe for me to report in anywhere. I need to make every effort to advise my employer of what I'm doing and that I can't get to work. But I am under the operational control of the receiving agency. So we'll discuss that a little bit more. So continue the slide, please. So when I report for work at a receiving agency, and you can see when you're thinking about this, if I live in Beaverton, I need to know where the Beaverton Emergency Operations Center is so that I can report there. So there's some pieces of information that I think the jurisdictions are gonna, or that we need to figure out to help people figure out where these places are. So I'm going to report to the receiving agency, to the Emergency Operations Center. I'm going to request an assignment from somebody who's authorized to give me one. I need to follow the guidance of that receiving agency, whatever their building official is saying to do, their building code policies. So I'm under the direction and control of the receiving agency. And I need to, once I can get back to my work, I need to end that self-deployment as a stranded worker, unless there's an agreement between, unless somebody calls somebody and says, you keep her, we've got so-and-so from your bureau, let's just keep it like it is. Okay. Now the building related swag. Hey, Sandra, I just noticed that the recording is paused. I wonder if you want to start that. The building related swag for the receiving agency, they do their very best to communicate with the responding agency ASAP to say, hey, we've got one of your people. So as a stranded worker, I try to do that also, but if communication is blocked, there should be radio communication that can happen. So the receiving agency first tries to contact my agency and make sure it's all good. They request approval. And the receiving agency needs to confirm that they actually really need me, because maybe they don't. And if they don't, then they don't need to accept help that they don't need. They need to make necessary arrangements and cover costs for housing, meals, and transportation. This is not usually relevant in the stranded worker situation because I live there. That's how come I was able to walk into their office. But later on in a response, we will probably be getting people from outside the region, not covered by a stranded worker agreement, but outside the region. And that's where you have to think about housing things, the way Alice mentioned earlier about that. Okay. So also they're responsible to supervise the stranded worker, and the most important thing is that they need to keep timesheets and daily logs to track the stranded workers' hours. And because in the end that gets provided to the responding agency, that's really important especially if we think we're going to get reimbursed from FEMA. So timesheets and daily logs. But in an emergency operation, pretty much that's standard procedure. So they're probably keeping it for everybody. They just need to make sure that the stranded worker is included in that. Okay, so for the responding agency, my boss, the people that let me go, I'm going to continue to get paid by them. So I'm still their staff and I'm under their administrative control, kind of all the HR issues. Even though I'm under the operational control of the receiving agency, I'm still under the administrative HR control of the responding agency. And then the responding, once it's over and I've reported back to my normal boss and my normal work location, the responding agency invoices, my bosses invoice the receiving agency for my time, not including the first 12 hours. And that the SWAG kind of has a discussion about how you figure that out, the amount out, but it's based on what I'm being paid back at the other organization, at my boss. Will you advance the slide? So here's how the money works. The responding agency invoices a receiving agency and, you know, based on those timesheets and the time logs. So if while I'm at the receiving agency, I also am doing some kind of remote work for mine, then obviously that time needs to get subtracted out so that the receiving agency isn't paying for that. Also that between the receiving and responding agency, they might make other arrangements for payment. They might say, hey, you have a BSE from us, we'll take Ann, let's just call it good. It's across the board, we don't need to do money. So they can make their own arrangement. The SWAG just kind of sets up what the expectations are so people have something to go on as they're making that arrangement. And then the receiving agency should pay within 60 days of receiving the invoice. And that also is negotiable, is just to set an expectation for what happens. Okay, next slide. So the SWAG has been circulated to the counties and we're waiting for signatures. And the signatures, we need 3 signatures and we're now circulating this to the municipalities also. For their signatures, but these are the 3 signatures that we need. Your duly authorized representative, which might be an elected. RDPO isn't going to say who that is. You guys have to say who that is, but it could be the city administrator, mayor, whatever, the duly authorized representative. Also, number 2 there is your legal, is somebody from legal. And then the number 3 might be you guys. It's who's authorized to implement, like the building official that might use these, who's going to do it, or the emergency manager, and it's the emergency manager that will probably shepherd getting this agreement signed and passed back to others. Okay, any questions about this? I have just one more slide. So we were getting close to time there. And thanks for especially to Lourdes and Roberta, who let me go back over a few other things. Will you advance the slide, please? So, so far this is set up for all the 5 RDPO counties. Now, with Clark County, it's just going to be with Clark County because Washington State has a really extensive mutual aid agreement. So they're all kind of covered for folks that are outside there. So, but in Oregon, that's not necessarily the case. So we're disseminating this to municipalities and the counties in that 5-county area. But there's all sorts of folks that like work in Sherwood, but they live in Yamhill County, or they work in Multnomah County, but they live in Marion County and Woodburn. So we wrote this so that it could be used in all those other places. Like we're not limiting it and saying you have to be in RDPO county. The limitation is really that you need to know where your people work. And then we kind of try to get them to do a signature. So some of this right now we could coordinate centrally, but this project will end in June, in which case we won't have the bandwidth to do that. But so you can see that there's a kind of communication piece with the workers that would be covered under this to figure out where do they actually live and work, and do we need to reach out broader than that to other jurisdictions to get their signature. We are willing to do that legwork. We're willing to do that work now up until the end of the project if we know if we know where to reach out to and who to go. So that is the end of this. That's the end of the brain dump. any comments or questions from anybody? And if you want to contact me separately, just send me an email. That links to my email there. But it's just ann.castleton@portlandoregon.gov if you don't want to do that. Any comments from anybody? Alice?
No comments. Appreciate the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you were talking and I realized the cost share and all of that, I think oftentimes we make these really kind of sweeping agreements and I think they're great. And then we activate and we have to initiate it and our HR, labor relations, and our finance people are like, what's this? So thanks for the presentation because it reminds me of like, oh, I need to make sure they know what this is and about. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and Alice, we should maybe, I think we have thought about developing the agreement, which was way harder than I thought, and getting the counties to sign and approve, which is way harder than I thought, and is still happening. And then to just disseminate it out. But I know that these things just don't flow out like manna from heaven. Is a lot of background work, and we need to think about who needs to become aware, like within the entities.
Yeah. How to actually operationalize it. Yeah.
So I may reach out to you more, and if anybody else has ideas about that, to think through how can we operationalize it a lot more and make it so that because I think the emergency one from RDPO has just dropped, like people did some initial work and then I'm not sure everybody even knows that exists. So
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure some people in our office, when they started working on the damage assessment part, had no idea that we had the other agreement already in place. And I was curious why they ended up being separate instead of like just redoing the other one to, you know, I don't understand why we would have an EOC stranded worker agreement and then a separate one for someone that is being deployed by the EOC. So I think, you know, and to your point, it's really difficult. So
hang on, don't leave, hang on for just a second. I just wanted to say to everybody else, you are welcome to stay on. And I need to have this conversation with Allison. If you have any questions, jump in, but also you're welcome to leave. This is the end of it.